As I get older and older and games move forward, it becomes harder for me to place myself in the past. For all the benefits offered in the current state of the industry, there are also plentiful of inconveniences. Long updates, copying and download times, and huge game sizes that can barely fit on your console or PC. Anticipated games releasing in a rush and unfinished state. Expensive DLC packs and season passes for stuff that could have been included in the game. And companies losing a fuck ton of player respect for after getting a taste of success. A lot of this stuff has been commonplace for the past 10 years, and they only become more difficult with time. Which is why I started up Super Mario RPG on launch day, and it was a fantastic experience. I took it home, put it in the Switch, and within moments I was into the intro sequence. No day one patches, no endless company logos, no promise of any DLC that was being held over. It was just an excellent, challenging, immersive, and an endlessly replayable Mario game. A game was released in such a beautiful state and accounted for bizarre sequence breaks. Some that you can get invested in and never forget for a long, long time, no strings attached. I never had an experience so pure with a brand new game in a very, very long time. The game took me back in a time where there were no updates or download times. When the game was finished, that was it. You couldn't update or patch it after the fact. It had to be bug-free on launch day. Otherwise, those bugs could be part of the game's effect. On top of that, the whole game had to fit on one disc. No installation, no copying to the hard drive. You just put the game in and play. I suppose I just hunger for the simplicity of the era lost to time. In my eyes, the very last era in which these basic conveniences were commonplace was the sixth generation of consoles. This was the era in which my love for the medium of fun and entertainment was born, and it's all thanks to the Nintendo GameCube. This is a story of a little lunchbox that went a pretty long way. The GameCube was all about letting experiences come first. In doing so, the system left behind a surprising library of fantastic games. However, it faced many deprivations before it finally bit the dust. In this video, I'll be discussing the games that set the GameCube system apart from the competitors. It's a fight for relevance in the industry, what Nintendo have learned from the system and its legacy. Hi, I'm Huckleberry, and for 23 years of this system, this is a Nintendo GameCube Retrospective. Although the Nintendo 64 have fun and enjoyed acclaim in the years since its launch, some of the decisions Nintendo made with the console will result in them slowly losing third-party support and close relationships or partnerships with some other studios. The most commonly cited issue was its use of cartridges. The system's competitors, the Sony PlayStation and the Saturn, both used CD-ROMs for delivering games. These held a max of 650 megabytes, whereas the 64 cartridges could only hold 64 megabytes. This limited what developers could do in many ways. Although they have featured very fast or otherwise absent load times, developers were forced to work around the storage limitations by lessening the textures and the sound quality, foregoing full motion video in most cases, and increasing the inclusive amount of content they included if they wanted to avoid compressing assets. Normally, they had to do that anyway, because the texture cache was only 4 kilobytes in size. All of the storage limits made full-scale RPGs like Final Fantasy VII unsuitable without user compromises. On top of that, cartridges were so much more expensive to produce than CDs. With all this to reflect, many huge developers like Squaresoft, Capcom, Konami, Namco, and even Argonaut Software, Star Fox's fame, transferred their resources to the PlayStation. The rivalry was fierce, and while the Nintendo 64 was still a very impressive system for its time, it was hard to develop for unless you solely dedicate your focus to understanding its architecture. Near the end of the system's life, Chief of Hardware Development of Nintendo, Ginyu Takeda, looked back on the system's programming challenges with regret. Nonetheless, when the developers had the chance to work directly and solely with the 64's hardware, the games would speak for themselves. These games were the reason people will never forget the system with great affection. They don't remember the 64 for its technical flaws. They never forget the experiences. The hours spent racing in Mario Kart 64, the first time they beat Ganon in Ocarina of Time, or the numerous slap battles they had in GoldenEye 007. They never forget the core experiences they had with the games on the Nintendo 64. And I, believe this stays true for the GameCube era. Right now, I'm going to talk about the games that made the GameCube the incredible system that it was as it's launched. Games that register the fullest ability of the GameCube's hardware. Controller, peripherals, or niche audience to deliver experiences that couldn't get anywhere else. But it doesn't matter what you decide to play on the GameCube, the console unifies by its main menu screen. You would probably think that a small floating cube just sitting in an empty black background would accompany some unsettling music. But the GameCube explains this is a blank slate, a chance to sit still and reflect, change some of the settings, or maybe look at the many icons for the save files on your memory cards. And above all else, it asks a very simple question to you. What do you want to play? Just hearing about a few notes from its ambient music reminds me of how many nostalgic or childhood memories I had with the GameCube. It is the most solid, most reminiscent form of nostalgia I have. It is that simple. Ambient bell pad piece connects me to every GameCube game I ever played as a kid. It transports me to a simpler time, and I think everyone needs that sometimes. Anyway, enough fooling around. Let's play some games. On release day, what demonstrated the system's capabilities of the GameCube? In terms of graphics, both Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 and Luigi's Mansion were fantastic technical showcases for what the GameCube can do, the former being developed by Factor 5. This studio became Nintendo's technology partner through their understanding of the Nintendo 64's architecture, and the Rogue Squadron games lives on the highly regarded games in the GameCube games. Luigi's Mansion, although also demonstrated how truly amazing the GameCube's controller is, and the kind of charm that would become a main thing of the system. In Luigi's Mansion, you need to snap the control stick in different directions, that your ghost is trying to make haste. Thanks to the control stick's octagonal notches, you can feel the accuracy of the digital inputs with the entitlement of analog control. You can tilt in the 8 other directions perfectly, while also making minute adjustments that aren't possible on digital D-pads. This works wonders in maximizing your profits in Luigi's Mansion and replaying the game countless times for a better rank. And for the release of the GameCube, replayability is a fantastic thing. Luigi's Mansion also has oodles of personality of its very own, unlike any other game I've played before, thanks to its ghosts, character writing, and a very cool and good soundtrack. Not even the sequels could actually copy its charm, instead of forging their own paths. So, we're already off to a fantastic start, but there's one game I love to mention that this game was based off the cartoon TV show, and it's a collectathon. It was also my childhood, and that is SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. When looking back at gaming history, whenever a cartoon entered the world of video games, you would see 1 or 2 titles released, and everyone would move on and call it a day. But with Battle for Bikini Bottom, it was probably one of my favorite licensed and SpongeBob games I've ever played. If you might not have known, when I was a little kid, I loved SpongeBob. I used to watch the very first episode of SpongeBob. But when I went to my town's thrift store, I saw the game on the shelf, I bought it with my own allowance. I played it, and I'll never forget it. Heck, about 5 years ago, THQ Nordic made a remake of it. Anyway, the plot is that Plankton is creating robots to take over Bikini Bottom. But Plankton accidentally puts the lever to don't obey. And SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy are going to stop the robots from taking over Bikini Bottom. They even have some familiar locations from the show, and they also sprinkle some references from the show as well. You can also collect golden spatulas, talk to the characters from the show, and do some missions or tasks. If you're a fan of SpongeBob like me, I would highly recommend playing this. But there's one company that surprisingly made games for the GameCube, and that company is Sega. Sega making games on the Nintendo platform was already a mind-blowing concept back then. But then they decided to start making Sonic games for the GameCube, and Sonic thrived in the GameCube. This all began with Sonic Adventure 1 DX and Adventure 2 Battle. Sonic Adventure 2 Battle has some features with some more detailed textures and geometry than the Dreamcast version. And it expanded its Shao Garden with quality of life features and in-depth replacement for taking Chao with you on the Dreamcast VMU. The Tiny Chao Garden to be exact. By linking the game with the Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP, you can copy your Chao's data and take it with you on the go. or transfer them to Chao Garden and Sonic Advance. Since Chao Raising Adventure 2 was already a step up from the Sonic Adventure, with Chao evolutions and separate gardens for each type of the Chao. To be honest, I spent more time replaying my favorite levels, Raising Chao, than I did on any other form of the game. I even had a good old friend of mine bring over his memory card when I was a kid, and I was able to see his Chao Garden, trade with him, and even battle. Yeah, I miss mostly everything about this. But when it comes to games like Sonic, his games were not in short supply. And like I said, a port of Sonic Adventure came out as well. In addition to versions of the multi-platform games Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog, and Sonic Riders. These games were everywhere in terms of quality, of course, but if you want to play the classic Sonic titles instead, Sega has got you covered. The Sonic Mega and Gems collections are still one of the best examples of how you handle a tribute or a compilation disc. Sonic Mega Collection gives you the original trilogy and Knuckles, Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic Spinball, Mean Bean Machine, Rystar, Josh, Comic Zone, and Flicky, all for $20 at the time of launch. Not only it was cheap and affordable, it gave you a great emulation of a ton of bonus content upon the games you're likely to buy the collection for. Gems Collection featured rare games like in the series, notably Sonic CD, Josh, Sonic R, and Sonic the Fighters, the latter of which was the arcade game, along with the other stuff like Game Gear games, the Vectorman games, and Stave States. Where these collections really succeeded though is the presentation. Sonic Mega Collection goes for a decidedly retro design. The loading screens have you flying through hyperspace as if you're going back in time, and the music is throwback and nostalgic. Listen to this in the soundtrack while flipping through all goofy Sonic comics and reading the game's manuals adds on to that feeling of going back in time. Regardless of whether or not you played Sonic before, this collection is and was worth diving into. It was and still a perfect entry point as it's preserved a lot of Sonic's history on a disc that was worth $20 at the time. Sonic Gems Collection went for a modern, sleek look, and its electronic music and killer remixes made for a perfect soundtrack. Both of the collections are evocative of a similar hunger for the past, and even though these discs were where I got into the world of Sonic, the effect their overall showcase had on me cannot be understated. They were comforting then, and they're immensely nostalgic today. It's always so nice and great to see developers go an extra mile and create experiences out of simple compilations like this, and these collections are the gold standard for that. In a time where access to older games no longer make necessary dedicated compilation discs, or where companies feel the need to just bundle the games together and call it a day, I find myself hungering for something that could even come close to matching those Sonic collections. Sega nailed it back then. Now, let's step back for a second. I have a question for all of you watching. What other series received definitive games on the GameCube? Well, when talking definitive, I can never forget Paper Mario The Thousand-Year Door. It is a marginal step beyond the original game in character writing, the world design, lots of problem solving, the soundtrack, mechanical variety, emotional resonance, and fun. Simply put, it is one of the best RPGs ever made and I ever played, and one of the few RPGs to effectively innovate in turn-based combat by making you an active participant in the battles. This was something that the original Paper Mario did very well on, but the Thousand-Year Door notably improved on its gameplay in every way possible, in combination with everything else it did fantastic. Now, along with being definitive, another thing that these games reveal about the GameCube itself is the platform's commitment to revolution. Sure, through its peripherals you can see the outlook, but it also shines through the game design. While the GameCube was a pretty and a powerful lunchbox, and it was much easier for the developers to take advantage of than the Nintendo 64, but it had its flaws. The decision to use mini DVDs over full-size DVDs forced some developers to release games on multiple discs. They would have to compress the data and the video files or remove the content entirely, much like the Nintendo 64. But perhaps the biggest hit to the third-party developers was its lack of proper online infrastructure. The PS2, and especially the Xbox, took full advantage of the possibilities of online and online multiplayer. However, Nintendo was no reason to pursue it. Aside from Phantasy Star Online and the Japanese exclusive game Homeland, the GameCube really only used of LAN multiplayer. That means multiple systems could connect to one another on the same network. And even then, only 3 games on the GameCube utilized it, and you would need to buy separate peripherals in order to connect systems. Phantasy Star Online was a highly regarded game, and is still played on this day on private servers. So, why not have more online games? Well, it's very simple. So Nintendo's reasoning includes concerns over quality control, doubts over subscription fees, and wanting the kids and families to feel safe and secure with their very own GameCube at home. This set apart many developers that wanted to deliver online experiences across every system, as they would either have to spend money on an online mode for a console that had no online strategy in place, or release the game without online features and hope people can buy it. The original Battlefield 1942 was proposed to Nintendo as a GameCube exclusive, but you can see how well that went over. These problems combined with the console's lunchboxy appearance and Nintendo's traditional focus on family-friendly fun and entertainment drove many third-party developers away from the system. Even Nintendo's strongest and most confident releases were met with doubt. Super Mario Sunshine. I love this game. Flood and Yoshi both feel like perfect and organic add-ons of Mario's abilities, and each objective had defined characteristics that can naturally revamp how you explore a level. However, not much people has keen on the game's structure, which focus on clearing Episode 7 in every world and eliminate the freedom established in Mario 64. And gaining 120 shines meant collecting 240 blue coins. It's a very confusing and complicated situation, and I love to make a full retrospective on this game someday, wink wink. But there was one company that made 5 exclusive games to the GameCube, and that was Capcom. And one of the 5 games I'm going to mention was for a limited time back then. A big reason to purchase the GameCube. It even got Game of the Year awards in 2005, and it's one of the best games in the franchise. While Resident Evil had an extraordinary presence on the GameCube, with an excellent remake of the original game, as well as some ports of 2, 3, and Code Veronica, and the original prequel game 0. But the one that had the biggest impact was Resident Evil 4. Seeing as most of us have played this game by now, I'm not going to sing its praises over again. Simply put, it forever revolutionized third-person shooters, without compromising on the intense gameplay of Resident Evil. By focusing the attention on accuracy and an anxious setting, it made survival contingent on how well you can aim, strategize, and organize. Its effects can be felt in any genre it influenced, the games inspired, and even the future of the Resident Evil franchise. In summary, Capcom's 5 games were not all failures. Gosh no. But the strategy itself unfortunately flopped. The GameCube's market share and target audience wasn't broad enough for the games to make bank, especially when you consider the immaterial and mature themes they dealt with. This as a result, and this exclusivity deal fading into the background, with Nintendo and Capcom's relationship remaining strained for many years. It was the final nail in the system's coffin, despite everything it had accomplished over the course of the GameCube's life. Nintendo eventually abandoned ship and released the Wii in November 19, 2006, and into December 2006 in most other regions, with the GameCube being discontinued the following year and leaving Madden NFL 2008 as the last game released for the GameCube. Yeah, what a swan song. And that, my friends, is a tragic story of the GameCube. But while its life ended there, its legacy lived on for many years. The Wii was the beginning of Nintendo's Blue Ocean strategy, in which they focused on capturing an audience outside of the ones their competitors were fighting over. The strategy has since brought them fantastic levels of success, with the Wii attempts to reach an untapped market of casual players and non-gamers. I feel as though that this was a move directly inspired by how conflicting and radically different the GameCube's games were. on top of Satoru Iwata's mission to reach new people with Nintendo's games in the Wii and the DS era. The GameCube library thought outside the box a lot of the time, as demonstrated before the genre-defying games and innovative peripherals. While the software library was constrained by missteps made on the company's part, it was the beginning of an era in which Nintendo would thrive and continue to think differently than its competitors. And thanks to the Wii's controller setup and DS dual screens, different ways of playing and experiencing games came out in that generation too. And on top of the Wii's robust Virtual Console lineup of NES, SNES, and Nintendo 64 games, the Wii's similar architecture to the GameCube meant that it was full backwards compatible with GameCube games, controllers, memory cards, and peripherals. This means that with a much larger install base than before, players in the Wii could have all the amazing experiences that they might have missed out on. There's unfortunately no support for the broadband adapter or Game Boy player, but everything else was compatible, including games like Four Swords Adventures and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. This arguably made the Wii Nintendo's best home console, but that's a discussion for another day. Obviously, the Wii wasn't going to stay on the market forever, and neither were the GameCube games of old. As the Wii U rolled around, GameCube games had long since left local GameStops, and the system didn't even support GameCube discs, despite having native compatibility for them built in. Now, in the Switch era, there are no other official way to support these games, and Nintendo has yet to plan a solution. Games from other companies like Sega and Capcom have since been released or remade, and I understand that licensing could prevent games like Star Wars Rogue Squadron from being re-released. But Nintendo already owns all the first-party games I focus on this video, and they have done little to continue their legacy content. Some of the games that depend on peripherals like Four Swords Adventures might be impractical and financially ill-advised to re-release that would mean creating a solution for the single relatively niche game. But most of the games I mentioned today have no reason to be held back. They have an adapter for the controllers best suited to these games, and promises can be made otherwise, like they did with Mario Sunshine. Oh, by the way, Super Mario Sunshine is available on the Switch, but the compilation It Is Playable has since been delisted in stores, as they felt it was best as a temporary celebration of Mario's anniversary. But the only way you can buy this game is only on Amazon. But I think it was a sales tactic, and they capitalized on nostalgia and the fear of missing out over continuing their games. With Super Mario Sunshine's kind of inclusion on the Switch, it's clear that they have an emulator in place to support these games, and a company willing to work on it. The Nintendo European Research and Development Division, or NERD for short, is currently hard at work on maintaining the NES and SNES emulators in place on Nintendo Switch Online, and the N64 emulator too. They also develop a DS emulator for the Wii U Virtual Console, as well as the emulation on 3D All-Stars for Mario 64, Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy. So, what's holding them back from bringing the GameCube games on the Switch? I don't know. They're sitting on money, and I wish I had a perfect answer as to why. People want to buy these games, but they have no viable way to do so directly. Other systems are also in a problematic position thanks to Nintendo Switch Online service. It took almost a year and a half for the NES to finally come to the Switch, for example. Along the way, Nintendo would cheap feed us games that wouldn't always be exciting, and games like Earthbound and Super Mario RPG the original remaining unaccounted for. Flashback to the Wii. Super Mario 64 was available at launch, with new games being added on every Wednesday. Or heck, how about Xbox? They made attempts in maintaining their Xbox and Xbox 360 emulation, so that many of the legacy titles can be played on modern hardware. On top of that, these were purchasable on digital storefronts. But even then, all digital storefronts will eventually close, taking their games with them. This is an unavoidable reality in the digital era. Continuation efforts have fallen in the hands of emulator developers, and they have done a phenomenal job of keeping history alive. Provided that you still have the copies of your old games, playing them in emulators can offer improvements that were never even possible in the hardware they were made for. From pixel-perfect upscaling in Super Nintendo games, to achieving 60 frames per second in Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, to enabling widescreen support for plethora of GameCube games that didn't have it. So, the only way to play these games is to buy them secondhand. This brings us full circle as we pile another inconvenience onto the unavoidable facts of the industry today. If you look for originality and innovation, you're likely to find it, especially as Nintendo and independent developers continue to breathe life into a crowded industry of remakes, remasters, reboots, sequels, DLC packs, annualized franchises, and weird amalgamations of mechanics that worked across financially viable games. But games like Mario RPG Remake remind me of a time when nothing stood between you and the game. And that's why I decided with this video that I wanted to relive my childhood one more time. I want to go back to the time when nothing mattered more than having a great game to play. It'd be nice to have that simplicity back, but things have changed, and I have to accept that. I owe a lot to the GameCube. It shaped my interest in games, my passion for the medium, and a lot of games eventually drove me to create this YouTube channel. So thank you, little lunchbox, for everything. I've been Huckleberry, and I'd like to thank you for watching. You're still here? Great, man. I just want to thank you so much for watching this video. I was working on this for a long time, and I'm glad to make this happen, so thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be doing more retrospectives in the future, so get ready, I'm not done yet. But I'd like to thank one person that made this happen, and I'm glad he encouraged me all the way through for this. Josh, or known as Sonic Rush 141 SR. Thank you so much for making this happen. And I'm grateful for you being there for me and also hear me record this once in a while. So thank you, Josh. Subscribe to him if you haven't already yet. Anyways, I'm gonna go. Peace out, guys.